when I landed up in a tier 3 college. But I had no idea and I didn't know what I want to do. And that's how Magicpin started. पहले 2 साल तो हनीमून पीरियड होता है कंपनी बनाने का, तो मजे आ रहे थे. For most people, going out and shopping is a form of therapy. It is a way for humans to behave like humans. And we were the largest aggregator of sellers in the country.
And I think you guys raised the large round from Zomato, right?
A couple of crores of revenue a month to 10 crore plus. We went from about 250 people to 700 in like 3 months. That was the toughest period.
The government had already shut down all air and train travel, businesses and schools.
So literally like more than half of the organization was being asked to go, and this was just about when COVID was starting. But you know, when shit hits the fan, you will just say whatever it takes, we'll do. The bad part was, as I was building the company, I became very aggressive. And it's a very tough emotional journey building a company.
Welcome to the Prime Venture Partners podcast. This is Amit Somani, and I am delighted to have with me today Brij Bhushan, formerly co-founder of Magicpin. Welcome to the show, Brij.
Thanks, Amit. Pleasure to be here.
Brij, I've known you on and off for many, many years. I know your co-founder, Anshu, a little bit better. Maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about your journey before you got to Magicpin and how Magicpin got started.
Yeah. So I had a typical middle class upbringing that most people have in India. And I would say it was like that for most of my life till the time I got to my engineering. When I landed up in a tier 3 college. So that was a shock of my life, that I suddenly realized life is going to be far more difficult than I had imagined it to be. Right? And you have to fight for placements. There was only one company that used to come for placement there. And fortunately, I could get to that. Right? And from then on, I realized that I need to be a bit more serious about life. Right? And that's how I ended up at IIM Bangalore after working for 2 years in technology. And then I spent 4 years at Bain. 3 years in India, 1 year in US. And that's where my co-founder Anshu and I met.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah.
We used to stay at the same place in Dwarka in Delhi. We used to carpool to office. I didn't know how to drive. Anshu used to drive, and he used to drive very fast, very recklessly, as if I can say that. And that's how the friendship with Anshu developed. Right? So we have known each other now for almost 2 decades. Right? After Bain, working there for 4 years, I realized that consulting is not my cup of tea. Right? I rather have something else, and that something else was to build something of my own. And that was a time at Bain when Deepinder Goyal had just left to start Zomato, and Sahil Barua and Mohit and others had left to start delivery. So there was a bug, right? You know, you should also go and start. But I realized that probably I'm not ready. So I took the next best available option, which is to join a startup. So I joined Urban Touch with Abhishek Goyal. Very early stage, 5 employees. And in 2 years, we saw the full cycle of a company. You know, raising Series A, then raising a follow-on bridge financing, then selling the company, and then exiting that sold company, right? So all of that happened in 2 years. And I knew at that time that that's what I would love to do if I had a choice, and do it full time for as many years as I possibly can. But I had no idea and I didn't know what I want to do at that stage. So I took Nexus. So I joined, and I was very fortunate to actually get that offer from the Nexus team. And I did 2 years of early stage investing. So in that 2 years, there were multiple companies that I was part of, including Delivery, Housing, Tiny Owl. And that 2 years further gave me the belief that if I have to spend my 30s, I should spend it building rather than watching it from the sidelines. And incidentally, Anshu at that time was also in the same frame of mind. In fact, interesting story is that Anshu went to China. So I first spoke to Anshu and said, look, I am starting up. And he said, पागल हो गया है, क्या करने की सोच रहा है? You know, अभी तो join किया है. And Anshu was at Lightspeed for 5 years. तो अभी तो join किया, अभी तो patience रखो,
stay the course.
ठंड रखो, अभी थोड़ा और time है, अभी उसके बाद करना. He went to China on this trip that Rajan Anandran used to do. So he spent a week or more there, and he saw the magic that technology and internet was doing in China, right? The amount of companies that were getting built, the scale of those companies. So when he came back and he said, चलो साथ मिलके करते हैं, right? मेरे को भी करना है, right? Because it was very clear at that time, and we were talking about 2014-15, right? That's when Indian internet was actually beginning to grow. This was before Jio, right? So there was still data was still an issue, but that was the time when we both said, look, if we have to spend the next 8-10 years, it will be a lot more fun to build.
Awesome.
Right? And that's how Magicpin started.
No, phenomenal. I have many follow-on questions. First, about your tier 3 college story, which I know you've shared with me earlier. So talk to me a little bit about, what about that triggered you to go to IIM Bangalore, number one. Number two, what were some of the lessons learned at Bain and, for that matter, Urban Touch? Yeah. We'll come to the venture capital part of it later, right? That were helpful in the Magicpin journey, as it were, if any.
Yeah, no, I think going to that college was an eye-opener of sorts. It wasn't a bad college by any stretch of imagination. It was good, it was competitive. But I realized that I had a lot more to offer to myself and to my family than what I had done. And I was always, most people don't realize it. I was actually, when they meet me now, I was actually pretty careless about studies. So till my class 12, till this engineering entrance exam, I used to just get around and do the bare minimum effort to get respectable scores and just live with life, right? So that was the first time I realized that I have to actually, if I have to deliver to my potential, I have to work hard. And in my life, actually, that was the biggest change. And my parents had kids late, right? So my father actually, incidentally, when I was in second year of college, he retired. So you can imagine the responsibility, saying the eldest son now has to take care of the family. And it wasn't like we were hard in terms of money, but as a responsible son, you have to finally live up to that. So that was a trigger, and I suddenly became a lot more serious about studies.
Understood.
Right, and that's what changed, and that was the motivation that eventually led to IIM Bangalore in 2005.
And how about Bain? And particularly since both of you were at Bain and in a consulting background, did any of that, quote unquote, first principles thinking, analyzing different businesses, all that help in the startup journey? It probably helped in the VC journey.
No, it does. It does. So Bain, as many people who have worked at consulting will probably support, is Bain or McKinsey or BCG is the best school that you can go to for learning about businesses. And because you are forced to be in circumstances where the only way out is rapid learning. So I remember one of the diligence that both Anshu and I were there was airlines. It was a big airline at that time that was getting merged, and we had no experience, right? And in a 10-day diligence, you have to become smart about that industry in a day. And 3 days you have to write your answer first. And in 7th day, you need to prepare an answer that you have to present to the CXO of that target, right? So that learning curve, no other job can provide. So if anyone is thinking of the basic principles or groundings of how to think about a business, about to solve problems, then Bain and Consulting is the best place. And I was really lucky that I got that opportunity, right? Because that 4 years is actually what gave me the confidence that I can face any situation, any problem, and I can figure my way out of it, right? And deliver a high quality output.
Understood. Now switching to both Anshu being at Lightspeed, which is how I met him, and you being at Nexus and starting out with Magicpin, what were some of the things that helped you? And as you went from VC to entrepreneur, that was also a little bit of eye-opening, jaw-dropping, saying, "Oh wait, this is not as pretty as it looks on either side," right?
Yeah.
But even basic things like as VCs, we'll often ask entrepreneurs about TAM and go-to-market and etc. etc. Did you guys practice all that, or you just jumped in and said, "Boss, this is Anshu went to China. This is now we're going to do something in local commerce."
नहीं है. So for us, we are consultants. So consultant का सबसे पहले काम क्या होता है? अच्छे से समझ लो चीज़ों को. So हमने एक स्लाइड बनाई थी which said, स्लाइड से पहले लॉजिक बनाया था कि which space will we go after?
Sure.
And the answer was simple, जिसकी मार्केट बहुत बड़ी है. ठीक है, so very simple. And in large TAM, right? Because and it came from some first principle thinking, and actually seeing other companies, is that as long as the market you're going after is large enough, you can make some mistakes. So you will have margin of error, right? So, and if you get the market size wrong, then you probably get only one shot. So the moment you make your first mistake, you're out of the game. So we said, yeah, market तो बड़ा होना चाहिए, बाकी ये figure out कर लेंगे, ऐसा फर्क नहीं पड़ता, first principle हम सीख लेंगे जो सीखना होगा. So that's how we got to offline retail. Said everyone is playing in online, nobody is paying attention to offline, and there were some attempts like Snapdeal in the previous avatar had done O2O, online to offline. But there was nobody doing it at that time. So we said, that's great. Let's go and pick that market. And then like consultants, we went backwards and said, to build in this industry, what do we need to do? And we looked at various business models, and based on understanding of what worked, didn't work with Snapdeal, with what didn't work with, let's say, with Groupon in US. We figured out the best way is to build a coalition loyalty program and have some element of social. Because as long as you do that, you can keep the core of our business. The core of the business was retailers, small merchants. You can keep them happy because you can give them customers at an affordable cost.
Right.
Whereas with Groupon business model, you have to like give a 50% off to attract customer to your store. We said, look, we'll build a coalition loyalty program. So a customer will earn at multiple places and then accumulate the points and spend somewhere. And if we do that, we'll give them recurring business. And if you can give recurring business, the merchant will be happy and he doesn't need to give 50% off. So that was a thesis. The first version of the product actually had selfies. I'm not sure if you remember that.
No, I vividly remember and actually also meeting with Anshu somewhere in Bangalore and trying it out. But I want to go back to the TAM question one and then the second slightly more controversial question. So in fact, I think one of the founders of Sequoia, if I'm not mistaken, Don Valentine used to say, A market, B team, B market, A team. Yeah. Either way, the market wins.
Yeah.
So make sure the market is there. And of course, I think he was meaning more than just a large market. Yeah. Large, receptive market, ability and willingness to pay and all of that.
You have the chance to win.
Then you have a chance to win, even if you're a quote-unquote B team. I mean, nobody is a B team, but you know what I mean, right? That even if you're, not a complete team or you're like still meandering, if it's that market. The other thing that a lot of people said, and I'll just be provocative here, right? Since you came from a consulting background, so I'll pick a little bone, that, hey, you need to have missionary founders who have a connect with the problem, who have personally faced the problem, etc., as opposed to doing this top-down, MECE analysis, TAM, sham, whatever. How do you guys think about that? Because you've obviously built a very successful company and it's growing. I know it's been through many ups and downs, which we'll cover. But how do you think about your connect to the problem? Like, did you guys have a connect and passion to the problem, or it was more like, there's a big business opportunity and we're entrepreneurs and we're going to make a big company?
It was more of the latter. And to be honest, Amit, we didn't have a choice. We were thinking of building a company and we said, 10 saal to company banana hai, so there's no choice. Like then you go first principles, right? You say, okay, what is a large enough market? Going back to the quote by Don Valentine, right? Large enough market gives you more margin of error. So pick the large market. And then one by one, as first principle business building, keep eliminating all the risks you encounter. So we didn't have to even go through that dilemma of passion. He just went very top down. And I've now seen founders of both types. Right?
Absolutely.
Both kinds.
Yeah.
People who are just passionate about building businesses, right? Irrespective of the problem area, they also do well. And as this journey teaches you, right, there is no one way in which anything can be done in business building. There are hundreds of ways in which you can build companies.
Yeah, and the same thing is true of investing as well.
Exactly.
You have many different kinds of investors, right? Value investor, growth investor, buyout investor, etc., right? So now to the journey of Magicpin itself. I remember the selfie product, the social product where it used to be that if you went and took a selfie at a retail location, right, in a shop in a mall or a restaurant, you would get some discount or I don't remember if there were magic points or whatever. You'd get some brownie points, right? Talk to us about that and the various pivots, because I felt like you guys went through multiple pivots along the journey as you kind of evolved the company. So just talk to us about kind of what the company journey was and how do you keep everybody aligned as you go through the journey?
So the pivot part is interesting, Amit, because from an outside in, and now also when I look back, right, it feels like a pivot, but actually it was the same company we built.
Okay.
With a different mask, like if I may use that word, right? Because at the core, the business we were building was for offline retailers, right? Nobody was going to them and saying, I'll drive demand for you. Driving demand for them is actually the most important part that you can do for an offline retailer. He's willing to part anywhere between 5 to 50% of his income to drive demand. So we said that is our core. We need to figure out how do we add value to the retailer's life. And in return, if we do that, we'll make money. So we started with selfies because we thought the best way is to actually have some form of social engagement. So if you have social engagement on the app, if customers are posting images, you're actually in some ways promoting that store. So if you go to, let's say, a nice restaurant and you click a selfie with your family or your friends, and that goes into the feed on the application, it builds the brand for that retailer. Right? And that was the first 2 years of our company, right? And it was massively viral. And we became like amazingly popular in large university campuses in actually all over India, but started with Delhi University. almost every 18, 19-year-old was posting selfies. And in return, we used to give them Paytm phone recharge.
Oh,
so
very
literally,
nice.
it would be like a WhatsApp app. WhatsApp app, you'll post a selfie and there'll be someone like me sitting. Actually, literally, it was me sitting on the back end and saying, ये photo लग रही है store के अंदर से, हाँ, लाख लॉन्ग मैच हो रहा है, हाँ, तो 25 रुपए का उसको phone recharge देते हैं. So 25 रुपए के phone recharge के लिए, we got a lot of volume. So that was a way in which we were actually like first principle tinkerer, right? We were trying to figure out कि यार जो हम करना चाहते हैं उसकी मार्केट है भी या नहीं. पावर पॉइंट में तो बन गया है कि सोशल एंगेजमेंट कॉमर्स, बट एक्चुअली सोशल बनेगा नहीं बनेगा. सो द फर्स्ट 2 years वर एक्चुअली अबाउट दैट. एंड व्हाट यू से द पिवट, राइट? सो द आफ्टर फर्स्ट 2 year वी रियलाइज यार कि पहले 2 साल तो हनीमून पीरियड होता है कंपनी बनाने का, तो मज़े आ रहे थे, लोग हायर कर रहे हो, आप प्रोडक्ट बना रहे हो, यू आर वर्किंग लाइक लिटरली 24 hours a day. And then after a period you realize that the real value lies in figuring out how would the business get built. So product तो बन गया, but business बनाना है, तो then you start facing real trade-offs. So business बनाना है तो अब selfies are not a good solution, because if you ask customers to put selfie, then there are always debates in the mind of a retailer कि selfie घर से भेजी या मेरे स्टोर से भेजी, रियल टाइम सेल्फी थी या गैलरी से उठा के भेज दी. These are all real practical problems. So we said, okay यार, ये तो अगर हमें monetize करना है तो ये नहीं चलेगा, तो हम झगड़ते रह जाएंगे local retailers से, and the cost of that collections is literally impossible to manage. So said, okay, we need to go away from this, and we need to build a product which will have payments integrated. So whether the customer does selfie or not, he has to pay at the store, because if you pay at the store, 2 things happen. One, of course, the merchant will see payments coming through Magicpin. And second, which is very important lesson, especially when you're building for small retailers, you hold the money. So money goes through us. So if money goes through us, we can collect our commission and pass the remaining. And so that was what we did in the 3rd year of our company. And when we made the change, as expected, there was a lot of chaos. Chaos, right? So numbers dropped. We were anyways not monetizing that much, but the user number dropped, engagement dropped. Customers started shouting, merchants started shouting, यार वो 4 तो भेज रहे सेल्फी, अब वो भी नहीं आ रही, तो अब क्या करें आपकी ऐप का. So we had to say, यार hold on, wait for 6 months. It's part of the journey, right? Because eventually if we pass through that phase, if we can give monetization to the merchant, if we hold the money, we'll eventually show value to the merchant. And that was the big first pivot, right? Which is to move from social engagement to actually to commerce. So
Understood.
I say this quite often that, Anshu and I have built this company almost 3 times by now. Right? The first was the selfie generation.
Yes.
Second one was this monetization.
Through commerce. And the third one was COVID, which was forced, right? Overnight, when your business goes from literally 10 crore plus month revenue to 0, right? When lockdown happened, you have no choice but to say, ab kya kare? Yeah. Now, before you go to the COVID journey, and especially local commerce and retail was badly hit for many years, right? Couple of years. On the selfies as well as the commerce monetization through payments, right? What I was going to ask you, how was the merchants engaged, right? And how were they finding value in the offering? Because your offering was, look, I will come and get you new orders, because a person who's already doing footfall into Ambience Mall in Gurgaon or XYZ, they don't want to necessarily pay you. So would you get into these situations? And interesting that you mentioned this. Zomato was earlier called Foodiebay, and Dipinder, I had met him many, many years ago. And one of the problems I remember him telling me was, I'm doing a lot of bookings for restaurants by people calling, but when the restaurant says, no, I get nothing from Foodiebay. Back then, it was called Foodiebay. And he said, I have to prove to them that this is coming through me.
He used to record calls.
Yeah, one, he used to record calls. Second, one of the ideas that we had discussed was, why don't you take your phone number and then do a redirect and then have a VoIP server which clicks the number of times. So you'll have recordings, not of the call, but of the redirects. And you could turn it on and off based on how much demand you were funneling. So would you get into the commerce businesses being open to a partner, being willing to pay during the selfie generation, or you were not monetizing? And even in the commerce duration, was there like proof required, right? Obviously, payments is probably pretty strong proof, but that yes, this is producing incremental value, not the normal dude that's walking into the mall.
So during the selfie time, there was a lot of pushback. It was not that we were absolutely not monetizing. We had some monetization, but there was a lot of pushback because, as I mentioned, and merchant used to say, "Yaar, ये कस्टमर मेरे स्टोर के बाहर नहीं दूसरे स्टोर में बैठा था, ये एम्बियंस मैच नहीं हो रही, सी लुक एट दिस इज नॉट माई स्टोर. So we'll run into those issues. Exactly what you mentioned, right? What Foodie Bake went through. So the payment was number one, like probably the best way to just prove to the merchant that you're getting. It's through us, right? It's on our app. And of course, then one of the other things we did was right from day one, we built a very strong merchant product. So a place where the merchant can not just see what's happening in terms of payments, but also who are the customers coming.
The profile of the customer.
Profile. And how many other places are the customers going? Not just in food, but outside other category, let's say fashion. So when we used to show it to the merchant will say, Achha, this customer is actually not mine. He's probably spending 1% of his share of wallet on me. And all offline retailers intuitively understand it. Which is why even in an ambient mall, for example, there is fight for getting the store at the most premium location.
Right.
And it's a highly fragmented, competitive market. And you cannot have a predictable way of always being number one. So you're always fighting. You're always fighting with a new food outlet or a new fashion joint or a new brand, right? So thus, if we can build an aggregation layer in between and we can drive volume, genuine volume to the merchant, he will stop caring about first time customer, repeat customer, high AOV, low AOV. That was our hypothesis. And over a period of few years, we saw that used to matter. It actually happened. So most merchants will be happy that as long as you're charging me fair price for getting me demand, and your app is driving that demand, then I'm okay to part with that money.
Great. Talk to us about the journey of a typical small retailer in an organized or unorganized setup, meaning in a mall or not a mall, just a normal kind of street, right? How have they evolved with technology over the last 10 years? We'll do the pre-COVID, post-COVID, PC later, right? Just overall, like digital adoption, how savvy are they? How plugged in are they? You know, like are they selling things on Flipkart, Amazon, Magicpin, you know, whatever else, right? Etc. And then how about the Indian consumer? How is the Indian consumer that still shops in physical retail as opposed to many of us, or certainly me, like who's largely buying online? Very rarely do I go to a physical retail outlet unless it's an absolute necessity. So both about the business and the consumer, the journey of evolution.
So on the retailer side, right, I think before COVID, there was actually a bigger shift that happened when GST was introduced.
Okay.
So a lot of the merchants then moved from let's say more cash towards proper billed invoicing. And at that time, Magicpin also used to ask for receipt of bills. Right? So we suddenly saw there were very few handwritten bills. So a lot of handwritten bill used to come earlier.
Oh wow! When was that? When in that
this
year?
This was 16, 17.
16, 17. Got it.
17, 18 roughly.
Yeah, just
so
before COVID. 2 years
right?
before COVID.
So Jio, 4G, sorry, and then GST. So GST impacted the merchants. So suddenly the merchant became aware, actually they were forced to become compliant with billing. Now what that meant is they were more open to actually doing online transactions. Right? Because there is no longer that much of a bigger concern कि यार cash का business आता है उसमें से online से आता है तो उस पर tax देना पड़ेगा अब सब कुछ ही tax हो गया था right everything was becoming GST compliant so that was a big shift so even before COVID we started seeing that the merchant were now much more receptive towards online aggregators because they realized that most of my business is going to come in white anyways right so might as well do it properly might as well partner with apps and they knew that the customers were online or actually going aggressively online. So they were mostly okay with that.
And this is not just in Delhi, at a grassroots level.
Everywhere.
Other cities, Lucknow, Baroda, Ahmedabad, whatever.
In fact, before that shift, we used to have this machine learning equivalent technology that will read the handwritten bills and extract the bill price out of it, the merchant name. After that, overnight, like literally in a 6 month period, we stopped having to need that technology. Everything was digital. So it was digitized bill, so you still have to do OCR. But it's far easier to understand what was there inside the bill. So that was a big change that happened on the business side, right? Till before COVID, we'll talk about COVID afterwards. On the customer side, actually the big shift was Jio. So I remember when we started Magicpin, we were hesitant to even launch an app because we were worried about how big a size of the app would be, who will download the app. And even when we launched the first app, we used to get Play Store comments कि app बहुत ज़्यादा data लेती है.
Yeah.
Too heavy on my network. But when Jio happened, it just overnight became an irrelevant issue. Right? Literally, nobody will care about it. So before that, we had to really be conscious. कितनी selfies मंगवानी है, कितने back end calls करनी है. After that, we just stopped caring about it, and the number of sessions and the engagement on the app literally skyrocketed. And that is because of the geo effect, right? That actually data became cheap and accessible, and as a result, more customers came in. So as more customers started coming online, the retailers who were already starting to believe that aggregators are important, they became even more accepting towards the online customer base. So pre-COVID, this pre-GST or pre-geo phase is actually far more important in my view in terms of how the consumer behavior changed. And if you don't have that level of data, none of the current companies are probably even imaginable.
Yeah.
They would know 10-minute delivery of grocery today if data was not a constraint.
Yes, absolutely. And how about the consumer themselves, right? In terms of physical retail behavior, both, all along the journey. I don't mean back 2017, but could be 2020, 2024. Are people still physically shopping in retail? Did it go up? Was it indifferent? Was it hybrid? For example, in the US, there used to be this thing called showrooming, that you would search for deals online and then go offline and tell them that, bhaiya, this is what I'm getting online. You please match this, Bata shoe or XYZ offline. Do you see any of those consumer behaviors, or like everything else, the consumers just straight, there's some went to online and some went to offline, and there's not a commonality?
As always, like it's contextual. So for certain target segment of consumers, online still is preferred. Like you or probably even for me at this stage, like we just don't want to go out in traffic and waste an hour. But for large part of the country, and India is a humongous country, right? So there are for most people, going out and shopping is a form of therapy, is a form of social connection. So except for that 2-3 month period during COVID, I said probably 1 year, like that period, we have not seen any massive trend which says people will not go out. In fact, people used to love going out. After COVID, there was a massive return towards offline shopping. In fact, our business actually did far better after COVID than before COVID. If you take out that 1 year of tough period.
Because people are tired of waiting at home and just wanted to go back out.
So when you go out, you shop for food, you go out and eat. It is a way for humans to behave like humans. Like how long can you watch a digital screen? Like kitne der Zoom baatein karoge? So eventually you want to go out, and we are seeing that everywhere now.
And it's
people
continuing.
are going back to office.
It's continuing on the retail side.
Retailing on the retail side, it is back, right? Completely.
And pan India, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tier 2, tier 3 market were probably more resilient to COVID than the tier 1 market, but actually everywhere it is now back and probably better than what it was pre-COVID.
Understood. So let's go to the defining moment in Magicpin's history, right? Couple of our companies also went through that at Prime Ventures, right? One in the retail space, which eventually sold out to Amazon. Revenue going to zero, right? One of our fintech companies, Neo, they were in the, blue collar worker space, right? Revenue went to zero.
Yeah.
There's no blue collar work happening in physical world, right? So what do you do, like as an entrepreneur, Anshu, and you are sitting and like, okay, next MIS, zero revenue. Nobody's going anywhere. Nobody's shopping around. Nobody's, no receipts, no merchants, no payments. And, you had a probably pretty large team. I know you had already raised some tens of millions of dollars.
We had raised about $30 million.
So like, talk to us about that moment, if you remember, or that month. March 2020 is what I remember. March 24th is what I specifically remember for some other things related to Prime Ventures, but please tell us.
No, it feels... so for us, it was almost a month. So before that, we were in the market raising our Series C. Right? We were on a tier in some ways. We had gone from a couple of crores of revenue a month to 10 crore plus.
That's your revenue, not GMV.
This is our commission, right?
Yeah, so your commission.
If you were like growing every month on month, we have expanded the team. We went from about 250 people to 700 in like 3 months. That's the crazy growth that that's what you dream of when you're starting a company. कि मचा देंगे मतलब फाड़ देंगे सब कुछ जाके सब जगह Magicpin दिखना चाहिए. And in February 2020, like we started getting feelers that something is happening in China. And I remember Lightspeed did a global call for all the founders saying that, look, अब थोड़ा शांत हो जाओ, कुछ हो रहा है. Right? And I think it was clear to us because we were 100% offline at that time that we will be in a tough place. Right? Because we had expanded, so we also had limited amount of capital left in the bank. I would say around 4 to 6 months of cash with us if we had continued on the past trajectory. And we had all of these employees that we had hired with a lot of promises and dreams that we had shown to them. But it was very clear. So look, I mean, as a founder, like it was very clear that there is actually no choice. In some ways, these decisions are easier in hindsight. Actually, when you're in this, it's pretty tough. But it's easier because you have actually no choice. Your first priority is to just make sure the company survives and can see through that period. Which means the first course of action was that 4 to 6 months of cash runway has to become 12 months plus. Do whatever it takes. And Anshu and I were very clear कि यार ये तो करना पड़ेगा और ये अभी करना पड़ेगा before anyone else does. Because when every other company will be firing, there will be a lot of chaos. Right? And there will be a lot of pushback also from the government bodies. So that we have to do it first. And as a founder, I think that's probably in my almost 10-year journey, that was the toughest period. Because a lot of people that we let go were in sales and operations. And most of those guys were like personally hired by me, like hundreds. I was doing interview left, right, and center. And some of the senior guys we had hired from our batches, from past friendships and relationships. And during a 1 week period, we had to go back from again 700 to less than 300. So literally like more than half of the organization was being asked to go. And this was just about when COVID was starting. So the panic or acceptance about COVID was not fully there. Right? So employees were still saying, hey, pagal ho gaye ho, ruk jao, wait karo. And that time I felt they were right. Because I also don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not, but I knew that our best course of action is to actually take all steps we can to make sure the company can survive for a year at least.
Stay alive, yeah.
Right?
Default
and
alive, we used to call it.
I remember Bejul, who was on our board, asked us both me and Anshu, just one question: are you still game for it? Like, are you in this or are you? Because it's a make or break situation, right? We can also take a step back and say, okay, fight maar liya 5 saal. Too bad, tough luck. It's a macro situation. Everything is zero. What can we do? Roll of dice. Let's go home. And so Bejul said, are you guys still in for it? And said, we're absolutely in for it, right? We also have a responsibility to the investors who had shown faith in us. So at the first risk situation, we can't just back off. We said, we'll do it. We'll let people go. And I remember doing all those phone calls, sitting from home, asking people to go. Not just that, but then handling all the government pressure, right? A lot of labor inspectors will call and threaten during peak COVID shutdown, saying, yaar, ab kal aa jao yahan par aap. I will give you the pass, aap aa jao yahan par aap. Right? So me and a couple of my colleagues in the company were actually the guys who somehow figured out how to deal with that, right? It was a brutal time, right? If I look back, I will probably not hope for another similar time.
Yeah, well, nobody would. Now, back to the resurgence. So let's say you went to default alive, COVID starts tapering off, right? Later in 2021, right? Maybe early 22. How does the resurrection happen for the company's prospects? And I think you guys raised a large round from Zomato, right? After that. So how did that transpire, and what is it now that is going on as we?
So the third pivot from outside was actually building omni-channel during that period. So we built delivery. So as I had mentioned earlier, the core is actually the retailers.
Correct.
So retailers की help तो करनी है, चाहे customers जा रहे नहीं जा रहे. So we said, okay, अब customers are not going, but the retailers are still opening the shops. And at that time, the grocery guys was like the most reliable supply chain you would have during COVID. The local kirana shop was supplying everything that you wanted. And we had a lot of these as our partners. So we said, we'll build delivery for them. And that audaciousness, the craziness, I would say, not audaciousness, craziness of that idea that we have no money in the bank. We have no experience of building a delivery fleet. And we still said we will build omni-channel, which basically meant at that time only delivering goods from the retailer to the home. So we actually built a full home delivery stack. And we worked with all other logistics providers because we didn't have the capacity to hire riders on our own. So we said we'll do the best thing, which is we are good at tech. So build a platform, we'll build technology, and we're good at ops. So we'll figure out how to work with the retailers, get their inventory online, and build a technology that a customer can order from a local store and have it delivered by a Shadowfax or a Rapido or a Dunzo. So it's almost literally no capex.
And it's the inverse of the model, right?
Inverse of the model.
It's complete, because you were getting customers into retail stores. Now you're getting goods from the retail store into customers' houses or offices or whatever.
Right, and during that period...
And you had not done delivery ops before.
Never. In fact, Anshu, मेरा एक unsaid rule था when we started the company that we will not move boxes. डब्बे नहीं घुमाने, बाकी सब करेंगे. Which means we will not do hardcore ops. But when shit hits the fan, you will just say whatever it takes, we'll do. So we moved boxes also literally at that period of time. And that's how the delivery business started to pick up. In fact, that was the business that gave us the lifeline during that period. That is what allowed us to say, okay, we can pull through not just 12 months, but 24 months, 36 months if we need to. And that business started to come back. So from zero, we went to 1 CR, 2 CR, 2.5 CR. And then finally back to about the same level we were at pre-COVID in about 1.5 to 2 years.
That's it's a replacement. It's not that business, right?
It is the replacement.
It's the replacement business.
Yes. And at that period, we started seeing the tailwinds of customers going back to offline, right?
So
now you had two businesses that were firing. Right?
Yeah, so both one the delivery and then the retail guys.
So in some ways, the business of crisis became the business that allowed us to not just survive, but actually scale.
Yeah.
So that was a time when we raised a large round from Zomato, and within a year, ONDC also came, right? So suddenly, your macro tailwinds. So ONDC is now democratizing commerce. So it is saying all local retailers, all form of retailers can now go online and can actually ship stuff to customers at much lower margin, much lower cost than what is available otherwise. And we were the largest aggregator of sellers in the country. More than a couple of lakh sellers were active, and we said we will take that entire supply to ONDC. So now you have omni-channel, the delivery business we built. You had offline customers going to stores, and you had ONDC. Right? From that 10 crore, we went to now 40 crores of revenue in the next 1.5 years. That was again a ramp up that happened because of all the tough things and the difficult things we had done during the COVID period.
That's amazing. It's very few businesses have this optionality to go. And in this case, you converted the crisis into opportunity. Were the retailers involved in your diligence process of going from this inverted model? Or was that because all consumers wanted delivery, you were like saying, what do we do with, everybody seems to want delivery, can we do some delivery?
So retailers played a big role actually. So because we were still in touch with our merchants and they will call us and say, yaar, kuch to kar do. I will ship. They were saying, I'll ship.
Because they were loyal to you and they trusted you as a partner.
So they were saying, we'll ship. Aap apne app pe na dal do delivery ka option. I will ship, I will deliver. So it was, and again, it was because we could see that the core of our business, which is to help retailers, is still holding true. We should absolutely do it. Even if it feels almost impossible to do it, we should still put in our best effort. So I would say more of the retailer push. Consumer was obvious, right? Everyone was shopping online, but you need the retailers because they will have to pay us. If they won't pay us, there is no point in building demand aggregation.
Right. So at least 3 great businesses from that school of Bain, right?
Yeah, 3 great businesses.
Zomato, delivery, and Magicpin, probably many more. But fantastic. I mean, I could ask you a lot more questions about Magicpin, but just want to pivot a little bit, in this conversation, and ask you about your own journey as an entrepreneur, going through all these ups and downs, the emotional upheaval, some near-death experiences for the company. What have you learned about yourself? What were some things that helped you at a personal level, at an emotional level through this journey? And what are some myths you want to debunk, which are like conventional wisdom or folklore, but you're like, that was not true at all, about your entrepreneurial journey over the last 10 years?
So coming back to how I changed, coming first to that, how I changed as an individual. Both good and bad, right? The bad part was as I was building the company, I became very aggressive as a manager, right? And it was very different from what people earlier stage of Magicpin would sort of
say about you or think about
you, right? And people who worked with me before at Bain, at Urban Touch. And I think a lot of it is because there is a lot at stake. And you have literally tunnel vision, right? You're just saying, this company ko yahan se yahan leke jana hai, kuch bhi ho jaye. And every pushback used to feel like you're coming in my way. And I think that changed eventually, but changed because you started more reflecting that this is not how one should be. So that was one big professional development change I went through, that I actually had to rediscover who I am as a manager, as a leader. And that was a tough period because some of those conversations I had with people who I really respected and were really close to me. And I was being very harsh to them. Right? So accepting that you're wrong and building a company doesn't mean that you will just, roll over people. Right? And as an entrepreneur, it's very actually easy to do it. It's like a drug because you can actually do what you want, you can say what you want, but to hold back and become mature about it was a big learning curve that I personally went through. And it's a very tough emotional journey building a company. There were multiple places.
Yeah. If I may ask on that one, what made you realize that you were being so tough and aggressive and so on? Was this like just general feedback? Was it your family? Was it your friends? Was it a mentor?
No, there was an incident. So I had hired a person, I can't name him, but I had hired him with a lot of hope and faith in him. And I'm sure the faith was reciprocated. He also believed in me. So I had hired him and I asked him to go within 3 months. And I would actually ask people, I would actually be very nice, cooperative, gentle, like when I will ask people to go and not be abrasive. But that was the first and the last instance when I was abrasive. I literally asked that person on a phone call to pack his bag and go. And I realized it later that probably that took away a lot of who I am, like who I hold myself to be. That I took a lot, that incident just took a lot out of me. And then of course, more people came and told me that, fine, I mean, sure, you are a leader, but that doesn't mean that you speak to people like that. So that was, I think, the turning point.
Understood.
And then I met a few of my friends, other founders, right? And over a period of time, I realized that it helps to have a voice along with you. We call it leadership coach, right? So that person I started working with about a couple of years back. That also helped me understand who I am truly as an individual, right? And how I should hold on to that of my personality instead of, falling back into the trap of saying being aggressive founder, right? This is the conventional wisdom that people throw around. Being aggressive, being brutal is the way companies are built. I don't think that's the case. There are occasions when it is required, but more often than not, it's not required. In fact, most of my fond memories of building Magicpin is actually with the people I built it with.
No, very, very vulnerable of you to share that. I find that a lot of founders, particularly in India, struggle with this notion of getting a executive coach or 360-degree review or having a personal board, which is not your company board, not your co-founder.
Outside that.
Outside of that, right? To get feedback on how you're doing. I'm not quite sure why that is, but 9 out of 10 times of people who have gone down that route, they have benefited enormously. But I think it's very allergic reaction. It's almost like, I don't need a tutor for chemistry. Like, I'm an IT guy. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
what does that guy know about my business?
Right. And
in fact, I had the same reaction when that best friend of mine told that you should take a coach. I said, I don't need that.
Yeah, I'll teach the coach. I can offer coaching.
What will he tell me about running this company? I'll teach him.
Yeah.
But I think when these incidents happen, right, it forces you to reflect. And you also realize that even if you have a great co-founder, even if you have your family behind you, you still need that third person in your setup where you can actually have an unbiased view, because your co-founder and your family still are biased. Right? They're biased for his success. They're biased for the company's success. That coach is actually truly unbiased entity.
Yeah.
He at times will not even care about your professional success if it comes in the way of your happiness, right? So in some ways, that is why that is such a profound experience if you take a coach. And since then, I've been a big proponent of taking coach. And as you said, I still realize most people say no.
Yeah.
And I think that is something you learn from age and experiences. Wisdom cannot be forced upon others.
Absolutely. Hey, Brij, so as we bring this to an end, any tips and lessons you want to give to founders who are either in the trenches, hopefully not in your COVID kind of moment, but just building, going through the ups and downs, any kind of things that they should think about from your journey and your...
So I was told this when we were starting, right? And I think we had seen in some other companies also, but just one thing that one should absolutely ensure, especially if you're building a venture funded or venture capital type company, is just don't run out of cash. It's absolutely silly that you will end up with 3 months of cash in the bank. That should not happen. We had this rule of 12 plus months always. So which meant that even when COVID literally hit us with no forewarning, right, we could still figure out a way. Because everything else is out of your control. The only thing in control is your cash balance. How much are you spending? Where are you spending? And the reality is, whenever you're building a company, you will likely spend 8-10 years, at the very least. Right? So you need to give yourself the best chance of surviving that 8-10 years. And while there are outliers, of examples of in our ecosystem, global ecosystem of founders who have built amazingly successful and popular companies by being very aggressive in terms of how they manage cash. And when I say aggressive, I mean being very ruthless about spending cash, right?
Or frivolous, if I may say so.
Yeah. So, but prudent demand that those are outliers. That is not the norm. So if you have to build a company with an above average chance of success and give yourself 8-10 years, then you should not run out of cash. That's absolutely unpardonable that founders today, I still come across founders who have like 3 months of cash in the bank. That should not happen.
Fantastic, Brij. Been great talking to you. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.